Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to another live broadcast of Hear Me Now Ministries, dedicated to building up the next generation of preachers. You can see Javon's with me. She's already messing with me, trying to adjust my collar.
Hi, everybody.
Trying to do his show.
It's got to be right.
Pulling on my collar and all that
You
stuff.
got to come on right.
Anyway.
Hi, Kosh. Hi, Claire.
Tonight, honey, they're not on yet.
Okay.
Here. So you can come in and say hello to everybody while we're getting ready. Tonight, very important program, a big one, a conversation with the authors of an exciting new book, something unique that takes a look at a relationship with God in a different way, not a traditional way, not a church way, but a different, unique way called God as a Person. And joining us to talk to the authors is Kasha Gordon. Hi, Kasha. How are you?
Hi, Kosh.
Say hi to everybody. You're
Hey,
muted.
everyone. How are you? Good evening, and thanks for having me.
Good evening. Kasha's going to help us question these people about this book. And at the end of the podcast, we're giving away 3 free copies of the book, autographed by the authors, sent directly to you by mail to your whatever address you nominate. When you send the address to my Gmail account, we'll send out 3 copies to you. We're going to have a drawing at the end for those all the way to the end. And 3 people are going to get free autographed copies of the book.
Ooh, y'all are going to want this book, everyone. It's good. I got
one of
mine.
those books. We've looked at it, and it's very exciting. Also, at the end, I'm going to give a special announcement concerning the master's class on Black preaching, as well as on next week's planned live event. That is a response to the requests that came at the end of last week's live. So after we have our interview, our conversation, I'm going to bring those things up so you'll understand where we're going with that. And then you're going to want to share with somebody. So drop us a text. Let us know you're here. Say hi. I don't see Tina yet. I don't know what's going on. Oh, there she is. Tina, she's always the first one up.
Hi, Tina.
John was messing with her, didn't put her up. John is John's producing tonight since Paul is on. And so he's hi, Rose, putting up some comments. Joanne and Joanne him. Shabbat Shalom. She was up. You took her up. Okay. Anybody who wants to at any point send us a text, a message. You might respond to some of the questions that are being asked that will be answered by our guests. And here are our guests. Paul Nixon, Clarise Nixon, the authors of the book, God is a Person. They are the stars tonight whom we'll be discussing the book with. Hi, you guys. Say hello.
Hey.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
And by the way, Kasha, I meant to ask you, tell us who you are right quick. You haven't been on our live before. Just kind of introduce yourself. Let everybody know who you are, and we'll get right into this. Hi, April.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I met these lovely people about a day or 2 ago.
Okay.
I've actually known them for quite some time. And I'm so excited about this project. So friend, colleague, I consider myself family. Hope they do too, because if not, that would be super embarrassing. Family. And so just really, I'm here because I'm excited about this project. We've known each other in a professional and friendship capacity for so many years. And so reading through this project, I was really proud to talk about it and dig in and find out more about the behind the scenes and what the authors are thinking and feeling and sharing through this project.
Great.
Thank you all for having me.
This is going to be good. We don't know what Kasha's questions are. She doesn't know ours. We have plenty of questions. We'll share them around and give our authors a chance to respond. I'm kind of I'm sitting on some cushions here to get some height, and I'm sliding down. So I'm kind of trying to adjust here, trying to adjust my cushions. Everybody.
He's having a little trouble.
I'm having some trouble over here. Oh, there we go. Now we all set. Here we
We're trying not to laugh at y'all, but it's very hard.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
The book is God as a Person. I'm going to kick off with the first question just to get us rolling. And then Kasha, Giovanna, anytime you want to jump in, that's fine.
Okay.
Now, we put the book up already. We'll put it up again.
Yeah.
We put it up already. We showed everybody the book already twice. So,
Can I
What about
confess
it?
that I didn't read the whole book? Not yet.
Wow.
Why would you say that? I don't understand.
This is an episode. This is about to
I
be.
should kick you off the show. I read the whole
You're
book.
gonna kick me
I should
off?
kick you off the show. You haven't read the book.
Well, this is
That's a requirement. You got to
it's
read the
mostly my
book.
show, though. So
You hear this, Kasha?
just kidding.
She hasn't read the book, and somehow she feels she didn't tell people that she didn't read the book.
It's so deep. You can't just run through
You
it.
can read it.
You
can
can't just run through it.
Hey, Rose.
You can't just run through it.
Okay.
You gotta take your time.
Okay, here we go. First question.
Nice save.
Not scripted at all.
Tina said this is not scripted.
No, it's not.
Okay, first question on your book. Well, let me do this first. First, tell us who the book was written for. What were you thinking when you wrote this book, God is a Person? What did you have in mind?
So this is a project I started by myself a couple of years ago, and I got to a certain point in it. I felt like I needed some, just another head, another brain. And Claire was the obvious choice to ask to join the project. We had done some work before. Obviously, we're siblings, but we'd done some work before writing, and it just kind of went really well. We both found it very fulfilling and very kind of, I guess, subjectively successful. I don't know how you define success, but we felt like we accomplished what we were trying to accomplish.
Mhm.
So I asked Claire to join, and she jumped right on, and we kind of got into our workflow, and it kind of took off from there. But so the idea is to present. I think you said it, Dad. The idea is to present God the way He presents Himself. That was kind of the idea. Let's strip away every lens that we as human beings add to God's image of Himself. Let's get rid of all of them. And who does God say He is? And the target audience really is anyone who wants a closer relationship with God. Whatever point you are in your relationship with God and you want to be closer, you're part of the target audience. But a little bit more specifically, we kind of wanted to make something or write something that was attractive to people who didn't like church anymore. Did I say that right, Claire? Or people who had given maybe had a church experience and then who moved on and don't consider themselves religious anymore, but they still believe in God. So we wanted to make something attractive to that group.
I would add to that our audience is people whose image of God has been distorted by their relationship with their church. And so they've decided to leave their church or they're upset with their church or whatever. And I think part of our motivation for writing this book is to say to those people, your experience is your experience, but don't leave God. Like you may, like in some situations, you may need to leave your church. You might need to do that, but leaving the church doesn't have to mean leaving the person of God. And so we wanted to kind of reach those people so that they hang on to the Lord, basically.
Well, can I
And
ask
yet in your book, you say you're not anti-church. Excuse me, Kasha. You say you're not anti-church in the book.
Right.
We're not anti-church, and Claire and I are both, and I guess I can speak for both of us because we wrote it. Claire and I are both practicing religious people, right? We're both active in our church. We deliberately didn't name our church because we don't want any kind of bias, right? It's just this is who God says He is. But we're active in our church. We like I personally believe, like I like church. I like almost everything about it. I'm talking about like this is a church service, right? I think it has a place in the community, all that stuff. So we're not anti-church by any means, but we recognize that some people are anti-church, right? And so we want those people to also feel like they have a resource or they have a place to be or they have something they can kind of rely on.
Mm-hmm.
You want to say something, Kasha? I cut you off. I'm sorry.
So, yes, and I appreciate you all explaining who the book was written for. And based on what you shared, I was going to ask, so can you tell the audience, for those who have not read it, about how you set up and structured the book so that people know what to expect? Because I thought it was very thoughtfully done. And for those who have not read it yet, I'd like them to know a little bit about what they could look forward to. Can you talk about how you structured the book?
Mm-hmm.
So this is, I'm going to let Claire answer because this is very much why I wanted Claire to join the project, right? So what Claire's getting ready to say is this is like all from her brain.
I didn't know that, but so I'll say the introduction of the book lets the readers know what our motivation is. Why did we write this? Where are we coming from? Who are we talking to? And each chapter, there's 7 chapters in the book. Each chapter looks at a practical part of life, and just tries to connect it with who God is. So at the beginning, it starts with a biblical principle. And then each chapter said God is a something person. So we have a chapter that says God is a loving person. We have a chapter that says God is a creative person. Just some kind of characteristic about God is each focus. We have a biblical principle, and then we have the actual content. And then at the end of each chapter, we have practical steps for that particular characteristic of God. The purpose of the practical steps is basically to help move you in the right direction, because I think often we'll read something and the information will be great, but then there's always like the now what, and like now what do I do now? How do I use this information? So those practical steps are meant to help guide you towards the God that the chapter just talked about.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed that. Now, in the content part of the book, though, there's some ideas that pretty heavy theologically, and some that are controversial. Let me ask a question based on what I think is controversial. You reference in the beginning Whitney Houston's very popular song, "The Greatest Love of All." Very popular song. I don't know how much it sold, but and then of course the song itself has been sung by other artists as well. But then you kind of use that song as a foil to talk about selfishness versus self-care. Explain that to us.
Is this me or you?
I don't care. Either one of you.
So
I'm not afraid to talk about it.
First of all, fantastic song.
Love it.
Like anything that Whitney Houston did, I'm all for it. The message in the song, though, the Christian should recognize the error in the message. The error in the message is that there is no greater love than the love that that comes from me. And for the Christian, that's just not true. And I would say it's important for the follower of God to even recognize that any kind of love that we see down here is going to fall short of the person who embodies and is the source of all of that love, which is God. So any love that we prioritize above God's love, in our opinion, is going to distort the image of God, because it's saying that God's love is not the greatest love, and it is. So there's a big problem with that message. So as it relates to self-care and selfishness, so self-care is about, and I don't care what the dictionary definition says. When people say self-care, what they're talking about is taking care of themselves, taking time specifically just for them to rejuvenate, to recuperate, to pamper themselves, to rest, to whatever. It's about not focusing on you so that I can focus on me. Now, I think the difference between self-care and selfishness is that for me, self-care is about resting so that I can go back to service. And selfishness is about, like, the end point is just me and there's nothing after that. So to me, that is an important distinction, but also because God's love is greater than even the love that I have for myself. When I have a self-care routine, I have to involve God somehow, because I might have ideas about, and good ideas about, how I can take care of myself, but my ideas are not going to be better than God's ideas. And if God is the greatest lover, if he is the source of the greatest love, and I'm trying to learn how to love myself better, how can I do that apart from God? Like, it doesn't compute. To me, it's a little illogical. So I think it's important that, I think the distinction between selfishness and self-care is important, because self-care, yes, you are focusing on yourself, but the reason you're doing that is to pour back into the community of God.
So you, this is not in your book, but you would say, as I listen to you, you would say that Christ's self-care was when he retreated by himself, alone in the mountains, to commune with his Father. And while he's doing that, people are looking for him. People
And
want
they'll be okay. While they're looking for you, they'll be okay.
He's not accessible to them, right?
Exactly. The earth keeps spinning.
We actually talk about that in the book. It's not in that chapter, but we did talk about that in that book.
Right.
It's in Spiritual Dialysis. I think it's chapter 6.
Right. Okay.
But yeah.
And one more thing about self-care that something you just said brought to my mind. When Jesus took care of himself, he wasn't alone. He was away from other human beings.
He was with the Father, right?
But he wasn't apart from God ever.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm trying to create some kind of self-care culture or self-care routine for my life, as a follower of God, I cannot leave him out.
Mm-hmm.
He has to be an integral part of that process.
And so just to kind of punctuate what Claire's saying, I think part of our point is that without God, we don't even know what self-care is.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what love is without God. We have no idea. We think we know, but we're deceived. Our perspective is jacked up. We don't know what we're looking at. We don't know what feels right. We know what feels right in the moment, but we don't know what the effects of it. We don't know any of that stuff.
We know what feels good in the moment. We do not know what feels right in the moment.
Hey, John, bring that one by Nolette back up that you just showed us, where she said his sneaking away was to teach us we need to be filled again.
Exactly.
And I think, she's just sneaking away, but it really was that, because if they knew where he was going, they wouldn't let him go. He had to sneak away. They would have followed him.
They often followed him. Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Trying to get away.
Yeah.
You can say something, baby.
But I was just going to say that, I had to be in my late 50s, maybe, when I discovered, maybe 40s, when I discovered that Jesus, when I discovered the text in the Bible that said that Jesus came away often.
Mm-hmm.
And man, do you know, I literally ran to John because I said, he's never read that text. I said that apparently
He couldn't possibly based on his lifestyle.
I read the text.
No. Not that he didn't read it.
She said I wasn't obeying it. That's what she's really trying to do.
But I'm saying, when I discovered that text and I realized that Jesus is our ultimate example, and here he is getting away to rejuvenate, to recharge. How much more do we need to do that? And as Claire said, when he got away, he wasn't getting away just to be by himself. And, he was getting away so that he can get some more empowerment from God. Mm-hmm. So how much more us as ministers and as people of God, how much more should we be doing that? But I think what happens to us is that we get so busy doing the work that we don't think we feel guilty when we even come aside and say, we should do this. One last thing. I don't know if any of you know Ivan Gordon. He recently passed away, but when we were teenagers, he used to tell us that he was going away for like 6 weeks. Don't even try to call him. And we used to say, how can he do that? That's not right. He shouldn't be able to do that. But he had a secret that we should really emulate.
I call that spiritual wisdom is what he had. Yeah. And of course, you guys as teenagers wouldn't have had that yet. Mm-hmm. But he had lived some time and experienced some things.
Yeah.
And so, when that happens, you start to look at rest differently. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And people won't let you rest.
No.
And part of the reason is because people think that their experience with you makes up 100% of your experience. But there's like 50 of y'all for me.
Right.
There's one of you for you, but there's 50 of y'all for me.
Right.
So the individual is not going to want you to rest because that means you're not doing what they need.
Yeah, not available.
But y'all, like I said, y'all will be okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Amen.
Just go ahead, Kasha.
So something important that jumped out to me, again, going back to the structure of the book, because again, I thought it was very well done and thoughtfully done, is that you set up the loving nature. You set up the loving nature of God first. and talked about how that had to be the lens that you look at all the other characteristics of God through. So I wanted you all to talk a little bit more about that, because you talk about his omniscience and all of the different characteristics of God. He's powerful, he's amazing, he knows everything, he can do everything. So, but you set up love first and said that you have to use that as the lens and the magnifying glass, if you will, that you look at all the other things through. So can you talk a little bit about that?
So I did this actually leads into what I was going to say when you started talking, so this is great. So I did an exercise in some of my classes this week. We're working on an assignment. It's a research paper, but it's based on the Bible. Neither here nor there. Anyway.
By the way, let me interrupt. Paul and Claire are both English professors in 2 different colleges. You heard him reference his class. So in case you don't know that, go ahead, Paul.
Right. So I did just a quick exercise, and I wrote on the board. I wrote the words "the love of God" on the board, and I underlined it. And I said to the class, "Describe the love of God. Just give me adjectives. I don't need sentences. Just throw adjectives at me." So they started saying adjectives, and I started writing them on the board. And they said stuff like, and then the first thing that everybody said was unconditional. And I was great. They were like gentle, and they were like forgiving, and they were like, all these words for the love of God that we want. There was a particular word I was looking for. So to punctuate my point, I took $10 out of my pocket and I put it on the table. I said, "I bet you $10 nobody will guess the word I'm thinking." And then everybody got engaged, right? So then they start throwing these words at me, all these words, great words, great. I felt like they were accurate, but nobody hit the word I was looking for. So I stopped them, put the money back in my pocket, I took a different color marker, and I wrote the word I was thinking on the board. The word I was thinking was powerful. And I said this. I said, God's love is the most powerful force in the universe. But we don't think of love as a source of power. That's not our concept of it, right? So when you think of God as a being, and you understand that love is his primary, really only way of doing anything. Like love is what he's doing at all times. Behavior is the result of love. Right. So then we can, like, if you think of the full aspect of God's love, you think of it as being powerful, you think of it being unconditional, you think of it as being everlasting, and then you understand why he has all wisdom and why he has all knowledge and why he's everywhere all the time. Because in order to facilitate the love, that has to be true. Right. God is love, which means God's with me all the time. Which means he's always paying attention. It means he can make a way out of no way. I mean, it has to mean. So yeah.
When you say powerful, I have to bring up this point, and then I'll let you all segue. But one of my favorite parts in the book is when you make the comparison about superheroes and how many people create superheroes as a version of who they aspire to be. People make these images and make these movies based on who they want to be, and then they imagine themselves that way. But a lot of people also do that in relation to God. So I wanted you all to talk a little bit about that, because you say it's actually the reverse. We have to think about that very differently. We have to think about who God is, which, a lot of it we can't even comprehend in order to think about how we should even see ourselves. We can't just make some image and try to tie ourselves to that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I like part of that superhero metaphor that I like is that when I think of superheroes, I get excited. And one of the main reasons I get excited is because, well, 2 main reasons. 1, they can do things I can't do. And 2, they can do things to people that I can't do. So if I have a superhero on my side and we're buddies or whatever, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to get the things that I want, but also the people I don't like are going to get the things that I want them to have or don't want them to have. So it gives me a sense of control over other people. And that's not what God's love is doing. He's not trying to control us. He doesn't. I was watching a DC movie the other day. By the way, DC is terrible with live action stuff, but they're fantastic with cartoons. So I was watching a DC movie the other day called Injustice, and it has Batman and Superman and all the DC characters. And in this particular movie, Lois Lane gets killed by the Joker, and Superman basically for the rest of the movie goes on like a murder rampage. He just starts murdering people because his I don't know if they were married or not, but because the love of his life was murdered, his job, he feels, is to eradicate all violence. There's no more murdering anymore. But the way that he does that is to murder people who are murdering people. So if I'm a person and I have enemies, that's what I want. I want my enemies to get everything that they deserve, and I want to witness it. I want to see it. I want to be able to hear them. Like, you know what I'm saying? I want to be able to see that. So I think sometimes when we think of God in those terms, we're automatically starting in the wrong spot, because God's not doing that. God's going to do what he wants, when he wants, how he wants. And there are some people, like, I believe sin is going to, like, consequences happen. You know what I'm saying? Actions have consequences, right? So sin is a thing. So I believe that because of sin, we can experience the bad consequences based on the actions that we have. But even God's going to eradicate that eventually. And he's not going to do it by, you know, shooting laser beams through his eyes. You know what I'm saying? Like, but that's what I want him to do. I want him to get them, like, get them. Don't you see how they're treating me? Get them. God, why aren't you getting them? How is it possible that you can be loving and you're not killing the people that are hurting me? That's a huge distortion. That's what comic book characters do. It's not what the God of the Bible does. It's very different. The motivation is very different. And again, so then back to what Paul was saying, if God is love and his love is the greatest source in the universe, then that means that everything that he does, even if he allows death, everything that he does is an act of love. And this is the part that we really struggle with.
Including his discipline.
Exactly.
His boundaries.
Exactly.
The way he gives freedom, the way he gives instruction. It's all love. And so I appreciate that you all started with that as the lens.
Well,
and that's why we had to start with that, because any of the other chapters, they're going to be easy to misconstrue if we're not using love as the lens that we're reading through.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Good. I know you got more questions, but I'm just back on this idea of God is love, right? So if God is love, let's just say God is love for the sake of argument, right? Let's say, okay, so what does that look like? Well, the answer to that question is Jesus Christ.
Right.
Right. So Jesus Christ is literally God in love in action in the world. Love in action in the world is what Jesus Christ is. The Christ event, right? Conception, birth, life, death, resurrection, ascension. Jesus' life. That's what God's love looks like. So then, like this, God is love, right? Everything it does is an act of love, and love is the most powerful. God's love is the most powerful force in the universe. But Jesus had to die to make it possible for us to receive it the way he really wants to give it to us, which means that we don't really know what power is. God has access, and God uses a type of power that we don't even understand. We don't even get it.
Power and weakness.
Power and weakness, exactly. Power and submission, right? Power not in hitting, but in giving. Power not in taking, but in giving. Power not in being in control, but in giving up control.
Yes.
That's God's love in action. And again, we don't have any concept of it. That's not what comic book. Look, if Superman was out here losing battles, we turn the TV off. Like,
exactly, it's boring. Yeah.
Movie. Oh wait.
You made me think of John 13 verse, and I'm not going to do a sermon here. Jesus knew Jesus knew the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God is returning to God. So he got up from the meal, wrapped himself in a towel, poured water, and washed the disciples' feet.
Wow.
That's what he did with his power.
Exactly.
Yep.
He recognizes
He didn't got to do more power. That's what he did with God's power.
He recognizes his power, he accepts it, and then he goes to service immediately.
Love and service.
That's the love of God.
And this is why the church's greatest weapon is service. The church's greatest weapon is not the 10 Commandments. It's serving people. One of the things that Paul says that I love is that if we start with the rules, we've already started wrong. You have to start with the person of God. You have to start with that, and you don't have to do anything else. People are going to come running to you.
Right.
People were touching Jesus all the time, and he just had power leaving him, didn't even know who's touching him. You know what I'm saying? Like he didn't even know.
Because he was love persona.
Exactly.
It's excellent.
But again, he had to go away often to tap
Exactly.
into that source of power.
Right.
Jesus goes away to get reconnected with his source of power so that he can go serve.
Yeah.
Right.
And to your point, Claire, though, even when people talk about the 10 Commandments, we can start to reframe our thinking about that. So I know you talked about starting with the rules, but once we understand, again, going back to the God is love concept, we can reframe our thinking about that. That is purely love for God and love for man. So it goes back to service.
Exactly.
The Bible talks about looking into the perfect law that gives freedom. And you all talk about that in the book, that boundary of offense, not keeping you in, but giving you the space to roam freely within the context that God has designed for you. So even looking at the 10 Commandments, it's not a rule book of don'ts, but it is the perfect law that gives us freedom, how to love me and how to love your fellow man.
But you can only see the law in that way if you start with God.
Right.
As love.
As love, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Excellent.
I think Noelette had a point that I think John put her comment up there.
This
This is a good question.
Read
I
it back.
think.
Read it.
Do we need to unlearn putting church membership and doctrines first so we can get to know and understand him?
So unlearning.
I actually have a book reference that I'd like you all to talk about in relation to that question.
Go ahead, Kasha.
Okay, thank you. So one of the first things about the book that jumped out to me is when you said, as it relates to church, we often accept or reject church based on a platform, not based on proximity. So it talked about that in the beginning. So can you all talk about that a little bit?
What page you on, Kasha? I don't remember that.
Bottom of 6.
Okay.
6. That's the introduction. That's the beginning.
And it was powerful. Y'all read it. It gets good. Start with the lens, work backwards.
It's on page 6, really?
Yeah.
No, it really is. It is.
What do you say about that?
At the bottom of page 6. So it talks about how people sometimes will reject the notion of church based on something they like or something they know or how someone has presented it. But then it talks about how we need to look at it in proximity to God and our closeness with him and relationship, not just the things that we like or not. So it says, but I love how you all phrased it. As it relates to church, we often accept or reject church based on platform, not based on proximity.
Yeah, talk about the platform proximity thing a little bit.
Yeah, so this is actually an idea that we borrowed from another pastor whose name I can't think of off the top of my head.
It's Sky Jethany, isn't it? I think.
Yes, that's right. We gave him a citation.
Yeah.
So anyway, the idea is platform is like visibility or popularity, right? So we'll a lot of times, I'm speaking in general when I say we, a lot of times we'll like a church or dislike a church or attend a particular church or go choose what church we're going to that day based on something that's happening on the platform, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll look at the program and be like, oh, he's preaching, not going there.
Mm-hmm.
Or we'll say, oh, look at the group that's singing, I'm going there, right? Or we'll that kind of thing. That's the idea of platform. The idea of platform is the thing that's visible, the thing that's popularized, the thing that's up front, right?
What we like or don't like, and
like or don't like, and we make a decision about the church based on platform, based on what's popular that day. And a lot of times, and I don't mean to, Dad's not on right this second, so I'm gonna say it now. A lot of times, the churches will kind of steer into it, right? And they'll advertise service with something on the platform,
right?
They'll say, I'm not saying this is wrong, I'm just saying this is what happens. They'll say, hey, we have this particular person coming. They don't say it, but it's implied. Hey, come to us this week,
right?
Because we have this thing happening.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's a platform idea. Contrasting that with the concept of proximity. Proximity is closeness to the person of Jesus Christ, closeness to God. Proximity is relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So then if we're making platform decisions about church, we're not making proximity decisions about church, and then our church becomes a show.
Mm-hmm.
Your attendance become we're part of the audience. We're not part of the community. Giving back to the larger community, right? When it's a totally different idea. It's a totally different concept of how to engage with church. Like church is the purpose of church is to really serve the community, but that comes from God, right? The church is supposed to be kind of like a connector between God and the community, right? So we're supposed to be plugged into God, and that's what the service is supposed to be about. Let's get reconnected to God. Let's learn more about Him. Let's get closer. Let's praise. Let's worship, so that we can actualize our service.
Mhm.
Right.
But that's a proximity concept. It's not a platform concept, right? So if we're going to church because a certain person is singing, we have no concept of reconnecting with God and actualizing, activating our service. We're just trying to get entertained. I'm trying to get my praise on for the next hour.
Mhm. And the person was asking about, do we need to unlearn some conventional church concepts in order to get closer to God? That's what the question was asking. And you all said anything except a genuine, close relationship with God and with his people will be easy to abandon when something related to the platform goes wrong.
Because if I'm not there for the person, then it doesn't matter if the person's actually there. That's the other thing. It doesn't matter if I'm going to a service where the Holy Spirit is present. I don't actually care if the singer is good and if the preacher is hooping or whatever. I don't care if the Holy Spirit is actually present. So if the thing that I'm going for, if the singer that I'm going for is not going to be there this week, like if that's the reason why I'm attending, then my motivation for going to church is completely gone. What am I going for? If I'm not going to be entertained, no thanks.
Entertainment gospel makes you uncalled.
Yeah.
Oh yes, we need to unlearn some things. Is the shorter answer.
But like some deep rooted,
deep
like
root. They're deep.
It's easier said than done for sure.
Yes.
A lot of cultural and social and
I would even go so far as to say a little brainwashing.
Sure. And because of that, I don't want to let it go.
Yeah.
Even when I want to let it go, I don't really want to let it go. You know what I'm saying? So it's tough. It's tough.
By the way, I saw Stephen Tucker's name watching from Jamaica. And I don't know if I've told you this, Claire, but he came to the hospital when you were born.
Oh, wow.
Mom and I were deciding about how to spell your first name, whether with a C or an S.
Oh.
And Stephen said, use an S because it's more feminine. And that's why your first name has an S on it.
I actually like an S because I rarely see it. Whenever I see the name Clarise, it's always with a C. So it helps me feel
but not
unique.
yours.
He said S.
You got
We'll take this moment to say thank you to Mr. Tucker.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyway, now here's what I wanted to ask you about. And this is interesting to me. It's not exactly theology. And this is, but you use this reference to this Dr. Clarise, I think it's pronounced Gleiser, Gleiser, who talks about using a scientific argument to disprove atheism. Now, for us, we think of science as atheistic because, no belief in creation and, the whole God of the gaps thing. If you bring God in, you won't do real research. And God is not scientific because he's spiritual. You can't see him. But Gleiser here is talking about how science disproves atheism. I don't know if you wrote this a long time ago, if you remember that. Can you explain that to I got to remember you wrote this a long time. You maybe haven't read it lately yourself. Yeah. But I just read it again.
You all get in Ma's book club.
I remember, I feel like I remember most of it. Believe it or not, but
it's on page 18 though. It's on page 18 in case you want to.
Wow, but I don't remember where anything is in this book. This gentleman, I think he was a physicist, right? And he had won an award.
Yeah.
And, then they were talking about. They was kind of talking about this guy, and he stood. It jumped off page to me because of what you just said. This idea that the scientist is saying we don't believe in atheism. He doesn't believe in atheism. Yeah.
And he talked about humility in science,
right?
Which is a unique concept too for scientists. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, so he was really coming from the perspective of the idea that science can't explain everything, right? So science is like a sensory discipline, right? We have to experience it in order to really know it. We have to sense it in some way. We have to either see it or hear it or smell it or touch it. There's some sense, right? But since we can't experience everything, there has to be stuff we don't know. That's just logic, right? So he's starting from there. He's starting from the idea that we don't know everything. In the critical thinking community, we would call it intellectual humility. That's where he's starting. He's starting from this concept that we don't know everything. So he says the idea that because atheism is a declaration. Atheism is there is no God, right? It's different from agnosticism, which says I'm not sure, right? Atheism says there is no God. But he's saying we don't have enough evidence to say there is no God.
Wow.
So we don't. So I couldn't say I'm atheist. I couldn't say I'm atheist. He would say he's agnostic, but he's like we don't have I don't have enough information. We have to understand we don't know everything. So there might be a God, I just don't know. That's kind of his idea,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was really interesting because, like you said, science. We tend to think of science as an atheistic discipline, right? And science and God seem to be at odds a lot of times in popular culture or in academia or whatever. But here's an award-winning kind of world-renowned scientist who kind of speaks against atheism, which is, I don't know, it's kind of a unique take to me.
We are giving away 3 free copies of the book at the end of tonight's live. You'll get a chance to be a part of it when the time comes. 3 free autographed copies of the book sent to the address, whatever address you nominate. And at the end, we're going to have a little drawing, etc. for it. So, yeah. Yeah. So stay on for that at the end. Tell your friends they want to get a free book. Okay. I wrote some notes here I wanted to ask. I don't know if you have another question. I feel like I'm dominating. Go ahead, baby.
I wanted to pick the brains, and this is a mom question. So get ready.
I'm all for it.
You all for it?
Earlier in the week, you said you were going to rake us over the coals during this slide. So I'm waiting for the hard questions.
I'm freshly unraked, so let's get to it. Another time, let's get to it.
No, it's not really. As I was reading, I was trying to figure out who wrote this.
Marion is on.
Did Paul write this, or did Claire write this? So
I was too, actually.
Say it again.
I did too.
Yeah.
I was reading that. I determined.
I said for sure Paul wrote that God is fun.
Oh, you had a chapter on
God is fun.
being fun. Yeah.
And for sure, Claire wrote the chapter on. Am I right?
God is fun loving.
Huh?
No.
I'm not right.
You didn't
Really?
What's the chapter you
Eden
think I
is a
wrote?
playground. Eden is a playground. That's not your chapter, Paul.
Finish your thought.
Yeah.
Eden is
chapter
a
you think I wrote?
playground. God is a fun loving person.
Mom's
That's the chapter.
thought.
I know what you're talking about. Finish your thought, Ma.
Mom,
She thought she
Okay.
wrote that chapter. Yeah.
I thought Claire wrote bits of it, but you wrote you are the primary writer for that chapter.
I want us to go back. You said you thought there was a chapter that I for sure wrote. That's the thought you didn't finish.
Okay.
She didn't get
The
yours.
one where you were talking about emotional intelligence.
Oh. Which chapter was that?
Which chapter was that?
I don't know. Oh, that might be the essence of God. I think we talked about that in the essence of God. That's the very first one.
Yeah,
God.
the beginning.
Yeah. God is a loving
So
person.
Am I wrong?
Paul started all these. That's not true. Paul started 6 of the 7 chapters.
No, like
Yeah.
4.
Really?
Yeah, it was like 4.
Oh, my B.
Because remember, I started writing the book by myself and invited Claire to join me. So I had 4 of these chapters.
Oh,
I had
okay.
a draft of 4 of them
Okay.
before Claire joined.
But we changed so much that none of the chapters are completely written by just one
Okay.
of us.
Yeah, that's why I said no. It's impossible to tell at this point. Besides the parts where I clearly say when I, Paul, whatever, and I tell a
Okay.
story about myself.
Mhm.
And Claire says when I, Clarice, whatever, and tells a story about herself. Besides those chapters, I couldn't tell you who wrote what.
But I think what
Or if
Mom
there's
is
a
saying
reference
is
to
whose
Theo.
idea was it to say God is fun?
Yeah.
Not who wrote the chapter, but whose concept was
That
it?
idea was Paul's.
I had that's one of the ones I had started before Claire joined. Yeah.
So she was right. Okay, don't be dissing my wife. She knows you.
Yes.
She was absolutely right.
That's not. Well, anyway.
But okay, but here's a real question, and because oftentimes I hear people talk about God, His love, and we grew up in Adventism. We know the words to say, but there are some very profound things in here. How much of it do you really believe?
1,000%.
I want to know if you believe what you wrote.
1,000.
Of course. But how could we possibly answer no to that?
Well, that's true. You better not.
You can say I'm still working on it. You don't have to say no, but that's
I
the
mean,
question.
are some of those ideas that you came up with, are some of them way out here, or are you still grappling with some of them?
Oh,
Yeah.
I would say there are still things I'm grappling with, but grappling doesn't mean I don't believe it.
Right.
Okay.
It just means it's hard to put it into practice.
Mhm.
And I think that'll probably always be true because there are things in my life that I recognize the Lord keeps coming back to. The reason why He has to keep coming back to is because I don't want to change in that particular area or in those particular areas. So it's always going to be true that I'm going to be grappling with something, but for sure, every word from cover to cover, I believe 100%.
Amen.
There
Wow.
That's true for me too. There's some stuff that's kind of hard to swallow, that's hard to grasp, hard to really actualize, right? So there's one concept that I just thought of while you were saying that.
Mhm.
It's on page 64 for those of you who have it and those of you who are about to get it. It's actually probably be a good idea to watch this video later once you get your book and kind of follow along. That's probably a good idea. So buy one, watch the video again. Anyway, page 64. There's a subsection called Love and Survival, and we talk about this book, this other book. The book title of the book is Love and Survival. It's written by a medical doctor, and the medical doctor who wrote the book is an atheist. But in the book is about how love is a source of healing in the human body. And he talks about how love is more powerful than stuff like eating healthy. Love is more powerful than not smoking. In terms of health, in terms of the physical health of your body, love is more powerful than exercise.
Wow.
Love is more powerful than fresh air. So he says if you're experiencing sickness or disease in your body, and you're surrounded by people who love you, that's better for you than the medicine they're giving you. Take the medicine too, but those relationships are better than that.
I was gonna say, can I give up leg day at the gym if it's more powerful than exercise? Can we go ahead and
So no, but love is not going to build your muscles like that. But
okay.
In terms of the survival of your body, in terms of living a healthy life, love is better than all that stuff. He says that. I think I'm paraphrasing here. He says that having loving relationships and being a smoker, you'll be healthier than being a non-smoker.
Right.
Wow.
I remember. Yeah.
Right. So stuff that we know is terrible for us. If you have love around you, it makes those things less terrible.
Wow.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? So for me, that concept is difficult to like really fully engage with. I mean, that's not how we're trained. It's not how we're taught. We grow up. But again, like I said before, God's love is the most powerful force in the universe. God's love is so powerful that it works on people who don't even believe it.
That's true.
Wow.
Right.
That is true.
Has a healing power. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm taking notes. Stop exercising. Start
That is
smoking.
not-
And love more. That's not the point. Okay. But in all seriousness, I really appreciate you all's transparency as authors about how you relate to what you wrote and how you are learning. You all talk about this in the book, how you are learning as you were writing this. And so I appreciate this project and your transparency today. I promise you all are going to want this book. For those of you listening out there, it is so impactful for persons who may be grappling with their concept of God.
Yes.
And or a faith-based lifestyle, or those who may be living a faith-based lifestyle. And so I'll share with you what I was grappling with. And each person, I'm telling you, as you get to learn God and reframe your thinking about God, when you all are reading this, you will find something that jumps out at you. I promise you, when you all read this book, something will jump out at you. So I'm just going to share mine and let you all talk about that if I can. So the part that jumped out at me, now I'm kind of a type A personality. I'm a planner. I'm a list person. On page 39, it's called Planning with God. That's what the essay is about. Just to not take the authors off guard. I'm on page 39, Planning with God. All right. So it says that planning with God is making plans with God as the goal, rather than making plans with the goal of using God to help us accomplish our goals. When we're planning with God, God himself becomes the focus of our desires. I closed the book and said, y'all not talking to me. You're not doing this. We're not going to do. So I had to put the book down and walk away and come back. But I thought about that. Sarah Young, in her book, Jesus Calling, on October 17th, also has a statement that says anxiety is imagining the future without God. And she talks about planning and how we plan with the absence of God and create our own anxiety. So I love that you all had a whole essay on planning with God, because for those of you out there who are extroverted, type A personalities, very regimented in what you do, read this. It'll change your life. So can you all talk about that for a minute while I, talk to someone else about this for a minute? Talk to the people who need this. I'm asking for a friend.
So tell your friend that I think people who have been churched, I think the hardest thing for us to do is to just think differently about everything that we think we know. One of my favorite Bible verses is Romans 12:2. Be renewed by the Man, that's a shame. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
You got it.
Whew, that was close. That was, but the way that we think needs to change.
Yes.
And so when we're taught to plan, and planning is good. Don't just go through life without planning.
Willy-nilly.
That's not what we're saying.
It has its place. Okay.
That's not what we're saying. But we are saying that if you're a God believer and the purpose of your plans is something that's just for you and you alone, what kind of plan? That's not what Jesus was doing when he was here. Matter of fact, Jesus's plan was 100% about God and glorifying God to the detriment of his life. He died so that God could be glorified. So if that's the example I'm following, when I'm planning, how can I not include God in that process? And the part that's hard for me is including God from the very beginning.
Yes.
Because I'll plan stuff, because I'm a planner too. I'll plan stuff, and I'm talking about plan. I'm thinking about implications and consequences. I'm thinking about all kinds of stuff. I got plan A, B, C, D, E. And then at the end, I'm like, all right, Lord, if you want me to do this thing that I planned on my own, if you want me to do this thing, open the door for me to do it. I have to switch that. I have to start with just first of all, say, good morning, Lord, how you doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, acknowledge that he's present, first of all, and then plan together. Like, Lord, I have this idea. Can you give me some feedback? Like, what do you think about this? Before I start planning anything, here's an idea that I have in my mind. Did this idea come from you or did it come from something else? When you start that way, then the planning is actually just relationship building, to be honest with you.
Yes, I love that.
The planning turns into relationship building.
Relational planning, yeah.
Exactly, relational planning. And at the end of it, my desires, hopefully, through that process, my desires actually have actually transformed into what God wants for me instead of what I want for myself.
And getting him to just check it off once
right.
you're done.
And this is me being transformed by the renewing of my thinking.
Right.
I haven't even done anything yet. I haven't put anything into action yet. But my thought process is, Lord, come in and help me think about this. Help, please show me the thoughts that are from you and the ones that are not from you. Ain't nobody doing that.
That's what we got to do.
And it's really difficult to do, though, because we think without, thinking.
I'm watching the time is getting away. I want to get this one last question in because it's going to take a minute. There's some theology in your book that is challenging. In the chapter entitled, It's God's Prerogative of Divine Sovereignty. You give the example of the captivity of Israel and the deadly census. In the captivity of Israel, 70 years, you say, this is page 118, there were people who were born into slavery and died in slavery who had nothing to do with the original reason that God punished Israel in the first place. They were born in captivity, died in captivity, that had nothing to do with the curse that brought the captivity on. And then you say, there were people, 70,000 people, who died when David disobeyed God and took the census, who had nothing to do with the reason that God was angry in the first place. The title of your chapter is It's God's Prerogative. What do you tell people to make them understand how this God, you said everything he does is by love. You said everything he does is loving. How do you explain to people how God can love somebody who can be born in captivity, die in captivity, who had nothing to do with the reason they were in captivity in the first place?
My mouth is closed, Paul.
So I would say, because I get these kinds of questions sometimes in class and stuff from students. I would say you have to zoom out. You have to zoom out. Okay, so if you think of the Bible as a story, the entire Bible, the Bible's a narrative, right? It's telling one story from Genesis to Revelation. It's one story. If you zoom in too far to any moment in the story, it might look like God's crazy.
And mean.
It might look like God's racist.
Yeah.
It might look like God's a genocidal maniac. It might look like God is sexist. It might look like God is anything if you zoom in too close.
Yeah.
You gotta see the forest for the trees, so to speak, right? You have to zoom out and you have to see whatever's happening in that moment on the landscape of the entire story. The story is the story of humanity. The Bible includes the beginning of humanity and the end of the world. The whole story is in there, right? Prophecy, the whole story is in there. So every moment in the story, and I'm a literature teacher, so I think about plot diagrams. I don't know if you guys know what a plot diagram is, but it's basically it just outlines visually what is the story elements, right? And the story starts here and it goes here and it goes here, that kind of thing. If you think of the Bible as this narrative on this plot diagram, every moment in the Bible, every story in the Bible is somewhere in the story, somewhere in the narrative. And every moment in the story is for a particular purpose. And again, if you're zooming in too far, you won't be able to see the purpose. If you zoom out, you'll see that God is setting up this other thing by the he's allowing or permitting or taking the people through. So sometimes God is literally punishing his children. And that takes 70 years, perhaps. Right? But God's perspective is so much bigger than ours. So like when we were kids, our parents, no names, but our parents would spank us sometimes, right? Spanking would take, 4 minutes?
4? What kind of spanking is that? 4 minutes?
Whatever it was.
It felt like a long time in his mind. As you can see, it was impactful. It was 20 seconds, Paul, but it felt like
Kasha, it was not 20 seconds. Okay, anyway.
4 minutes though.
That's not the point. The point is, from our perspective, 20 seconds in the time in our lifetime is nothing, right? But in the moment, 20 seconds is forever. If you zoom in too close, it looks like your parents are crazy. What are you doing? You see what I'm saying? That's abuse, exactly. All right. Think about God's perspective. God exists outside of time. The Bible says that a day and 1,000 years are the same. It's hyperbole, saying these units have no meaning to God. That doesn't mean anything. So 70 years is like a spanking. But again, you have to zoom out to see it. So you have to see where God is, where it is in the narrative, and how it plays a role in what God is trying to accomplish. And everything God's trying to accomplish, of course, once again, is actualized in Jesus Christ. We win. Jesus Christ comes and dies and lives. We won. We won. Right. So all the stuff was worth it. Whatever he did, 70 years, I'll take it.
And if you think about the story of humanity as a war, there's battles and wars.
Yes.
I can lose several battles and still win the war. Like the war is already won, but there's still battles going on. And when battles occur, people get hurt and die and this and that. So I don't know. I feel like it's a natural. So I really like that. I really like that, Paul.
Thank you, Jim.
Zoom in too close, you're gonna miss the point.
No, that's true.
In the 4 minutes.
No, that's true.
Grissom just had a statement up there a second ago. I absolutely love to hear other disciplines unpack the Word of God from another standpoint besides just theology. Great definition. The plot, zooming in too close, powerful. And he's right. I never thought of it that way, but that's a literature professor's way of thinking about it. The zooming in, zooming out thing.
Yeah, can I speak to that also? There was something that you all mentioned from the very beginning in the introduction when you talked about your purpose. You said we're not trained theologians, and that's kind of the point. You actually put that out there for your audience. You said instead we're educators, writers who wrote this, and it's important that we acknowledge how much we don't yet know about God, other people, and even ourselves. So you go through it, and I love that you conclude by giving words to live by example. You give practical applications at the end of each chapter. You said, hey, if this is not your thing, or if this is your thing, but it's been distorted, here are some biblical truths. And you just list them out in bullet points. So for people that just need that easy read, I need to just turn to this page. What do I do now? Where do I go from here? You all give them that throughout the book. So thank you all for this powerful work. It was very impactful.
Yeah. And I think what you're describing now, Kasha, I think is an answer to Rodney's question, why this would be a good book for a prayer meeting for a small group, is because you're describing that practical section. You can discuss with people after you talk about the chapter of how to bring it into your life, how to actualize it, how to implement it. So it's not just ideas in your head, actually transform it. It would be good for prayer service. I'm sorry, I got to stop here because of the time.
I'll say one last thing. We're actually working on a follow-up workbook that puts the practical steps in even more detail and adds a few more steps too. And some of the stuff that are going in the workbook are like challenges. We have like a 7-day challenge. There's no challenges in the book, but in the workbook would be some challenges. This is how you do this for the next 7 days. Do these things, and that's the kind of thing that I think would be great for like a small group or like a prayer group.
Right. That's great.
We're proud of you guys. Great job.
Book giveaway. 3 free copies of the book going to 3 people, mailed to you when you send your name and address to jstephen@gmail.com. But first, we got to choose the winners. Tell us how this is being done, John. Do they have to put their names in? The names are already in. Exactly how is this working?
I think it should be the gentleman that named Claire. I think he's.
Here we go. Okay. Here we go. If you want to enter the drawing for the free book, type hashtag GIAP in the comments.
In the first 3 people.
Yeah.
It's pronounced.
No.
Yeah.
All the names go in, and then the selection process. Anybody who wants it, put your name in there right now in the comments section, and then all those names will be taken, and 3 will be chosen. Let's say 15 seconds to get your name in. Get your name in there.
I see 4. I see. Oh, I see. They're going in. I got you.
Going in right now. Entries are going in. Type hashtag GIAP in the comments. You'll be entered into the drawing, and when the process goes through, I see 9, 10 names. We're going to pick 3 people who are winners. Let's say 15 more seconds if you're just getting it in there.
You don't have any Jeopardy music there?
John, he's the producer. The producer's supposed to do that. Not me.
Sing it, Clarice. You know the song. Sing it,
What are you gonna do if I say wanna?
Okay, I'm gonna stop at 17 entries. 17 entries. Let's draw.
Who entered twice? What a cheater!
Here we go. The first winner is.
All right.
That was
the Holy Spirit, That was the Holy Spirit.
Right. Let's go again. Number 2. Write these names down.
I like the confetti. It's exciting.
Okay, here we go. Second drawing.
The post once again.
Her name should be taken out if she won it, right? Oh no, she's still there. There you go.
Wow. Second winner. All right, one more.
You can't sing us a little do an appeal song, Mom, while this is going on.
Oh, you got robbed.
No. Now wait a minute.
Come on, Rose. You can read Ralph's copy. Come on.
No, they need their own copy. She won fair and square.
Okay.
Yeah,
You're right. No. She's right. She won her own copy.
You going for 4 books? Okay.
We can do another one since we're 2 in one family.
Okay.
You can't deny. That settles it.
No.
You can't deny
It's meant to be Rose.
All right.
Rose.
So Noah, Ralph, and Rose, if you put your name and address, send it to jstephen@gmail.com. So we don't want everybody to see your name and address. Then we'll mail the book to you. jstephen@gmail.com. Put your address in there. We'll mail you your free copy of the book, autographed.
Stephen with a PH.
Stephen with a PH, exactly. John put that. There it is.
Oh.
John put it up. Oh, the 3 winners. Okay, one more thing. We're going to go off. One more thing. I want to remind you again of the Black Preaching Master's class that is coming up. John's going to put it on the screen. We originally said this was only for pastors, but now we're opening it up to everybody. If you want to be a part of this class on February 8th at 7:30 Central Time, it's just a 1-hour class on Black preaching. It's more than just a style. You can go to the website, hearmenowministries.com. Go to the website and you can apply there, or you can send your name to jstephen@gmail.com. You see that on the slide there? Send your name there and we'll include you in the class. Now, we're keeping the class size small so we can have interaction. So we're going to take the ones that come first and put you in the class. If you're a pastor, put the name of your church. If you're not a pastor, just your name. We'll send it to the email address that you give us. We'll send you the Zoom link, and we'll have that class on February 8th at 7:30. Anybody can apply. Finally, next week, we're going to do How to Find Jesus in Biblical Text Part 2. I said last time I would just put it on the website, but I got a lot of requests to go over it and the parts that we didn't get to before putting it on the site. So next week, we're going to go How to Find Jesus Biblical Text Part 2. That's next Friday at 8 o'clock, that whole 8 o'clock thing. Okay, I think I got them all in. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Claire. And thank you, Kasha. Let me tell you something. You know, you're our kids and all of that, but let me tell you, this thing blew my mind. And even this discussion right here really blew my mind. I'm really proud of this book. I think so. I prayed about this book, and I prayed this book will lead somebody to Jesus. And I believe that it will. It's going to affect somebody's life.
I wanted to say earlier that, and I was going to say it as a joke, but I'm serious. When I go back and reread stuff, I'm taking my altar call all over again.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it's ministering to me.
Oh yeah.
And I'm the one that was writing it.
If you want to buy an autographed copy, put it up there, John, for us. Anybody wants to buy the book that didn't win one, you can go to the website. What's it? cpnix.com. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're welcome, Rose. Rose won twice. Thank you for the book. Can you put it up, John? There you go. Go to cpnix.com and you'll be able to buy your own copy of the book. It'll be mailed to you as well, anywhere in the continental United States. Is that right?
Yes.
Be mailed to you anywhere.
I really wasn't joking when I said I have to put it down. You have to digest. For me, it takes me a little time.
Let's do
you know,
one.
I like
She
to.
won one. Yeah.
I like to read it
Yeah.
and digest it
Yeah.
and say, "Wow, who wrote that?" And try to
See,
take a little credit.
That's the wrong focus. Now, don't worry about who wrote it.
And I read it over several days
No,
too.
I'm saying it's just so good. It's
I read it
so
over
excellent.
several days.
It's
And I saw the first draft, and I still had to read it over several
Yeah.
days because it does require some contemplation. But it's worth the time
yes.
that you take to
Absolutely.
contemplate.
Oh, hi, Dewan.
Hey, Dwan.
One came, hey, Dwan. Looking forward to the workbook as well.
Yes.
Same. I'm excited about that workbook. Y'all did a
Hell
great
yeah.
job. Super
Amen.
proud.
Me
Thanks,
too.
Hey,
everybody.
thanks, y'all. We're over our time. I hate to do that, but next Friday at 8, come back. How to Find Jesus in Biblical Text, Part 2. We'll see you then. Thanks, Clarice, Kasha, Paul.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you, honey. Thank you, baby.
It was fun. Take care.
See you this week, everybody. God bless.
Bye.
Bye.